I can hear you, Andrew.
There we go. At least someone can. Thank you. Just want to make sure we hadn't started and I was missing something. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order, and I'll start with the land acknowledgement that at this time I would like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and acknowledge the diverse indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. And I'll do a quick roll call of committee members. I'm here, Councillor Knack,
Good morning.
Councillor Principe,
Good morning.
Councillor Rutherford is here,
Good morning.
Councillor Wright,
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Burrows,
Good morning.
here you go, and Minister Edmundston.
I'm here.
Thank you. We're also joined by Councillor Jans, and I'll also check if other council members are here. Councillor Rice, I see you there.
Yes, good morning.
Councillor Cartmel, Councillor Salvador,
Good morning.
and Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Tang, Councillor Paquette,
Good morning.
Councillor Stevenson. Good, let's start committee members. All right, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Knack. Or Councillor Rutherford. I'll go to Councillor Rutherford for the adoption of the agenda.
That the March 18th, 2022 Audit Committee meeting agenda be adopted with the following changes. Replacement attachment for item 6.3, use of IT contracted resources audit, attachment 1.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Agenda is approved. We need to vote on the approval of the agenda. Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Approval of the minutes. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the adoption of the minutes from the December 3rd, 2021 Audit Committee meeting.
We have motion to approve the minutes. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Yes.
And Mr. Burrows, may I just confirm your vote?
Abstained.
So we would need a
Yeah.
yes or no vote?
There's no abstentions.
There's no abstention.
I wasn't in attendance for that meeting, so that's why I abstained.
So how do we record that vote?
Just for clarification, the MGA does not permit members of council to abstain from a vote unless there's a pecuniary interest. Appreciating that you weren't here at the meeting, you're free to vote in favor or against.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll vote in favor.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Yeah. Display the votes, please. That is carried. Any protocol items? I see none. Items select for debate. So, Madam Clerk, at this time, I can let council members know, committee members know that there will be one presentation from our city auditor. So all the items can be selected or not selected, doesn't matter, but there will be one presentation on all the items from our auditor. So let's go for selections. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to select items 6.3 and 6.4, items 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, and 10, I guess, because they are dealt together. And then I would like to select 6.1 and 6.2, but I only am selecting them to speak to the report. I don't have any questions, nor would I need a presentation. So unless other members of council need it, I'm just selecting it to speak to it.
No worries. We'll select. So you select 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, and 6.10.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford.
I'm just deleting myself right now.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, can we vote on the rest? Councillor Rutherford, would you like to move the approval of the rest of the items? 6.5,
Sure.
6.7, so sorry, 6.5 and 6.6.
Yeah, I move the recommendations in the following reports as approved. Item 6.5, IT process ownership audit, and item 6.6, administration response to IT.
Good.
General controls process ownership audit.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Any questions? Seeing none, please vote. Yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. So, Madam Clerk, can you read back to us what we have already approved?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This morning, Audit Committee has passed the recommendations of the following reports without debate. Item 6.5, IT process ownership audit, and item 6.6, administration response to IT general controls process ownership audit.
Thank you. Request to speak, none. Request for specific time on the agenda, none. Councillor inquiries? No councillor inquiries. Report to be dealt with a different meeting, none. Request to reschedule reports, none. All right, now we go into our first item, and there's one presentation on all of them, right?
Yes, there's one presentation from all of them, but it was broken up by agenda items, and I would speak to them
Okay.
when the topic comes up.
Good, okay, got it. All right, over to you. Over to our city auditor.
All right.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mayor. So if I may start, joining us as usual would be the Deputy City Auditors. There's Janine Maraglod, who's up there, and Edwin Ryle. And some good news about Edwin. Today is his last day, and today is also his last audit committee after 36 years with the City of Edmonton, 18 of which is with this Office of the City Auditor. So he's dreaming right now about hiking and fishing, and he's not really here. He's here in body. So congratulations.
Thank you so much for your service. I don't think have you been in front of us, this council, this committee before? So this your first meeting and last meeting to this? What?
I think I was one of the earlier ones. but
Were you?
Thank you very much. For
You want to say a few words?
I do, actually.
Yeah, please do, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I want to thank you for all your work over the years as counselors. You've really been supportive of the Office of the City Auditor, and that's always meant a lot. I always remember Councillor Knack. You're always one of our biggest supporters and such a proponent for the Office of the City Auditor. So that's really things that I'll remember. And I also know you all work very hard, and you provide a lot of leadership to the city. So I thank you for that.
No, thank you so much for your work and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Good,
Mayor.
yeah. Okay.
So I would present on topic 6.1, the project management of transportation infrastructure, but I believe Councillor Knack had said he just wanted to comment on this audit without a presentation, and I'll abide by that direction. Was that 6.1?
I'll just ask if other committee members need a presentation on that.
No, I have questions.
You have questions? Okay, yeah, no presentation, so there's no need for presentation on that. We can directly go into questions on that. So please sign up for questions. Councillor Wright?
Hi, thank you very much. I just have a couple questions. So I'm just looking at that they can't report on the quality. So I'm just wondering, even though things seem to show like within budget or on schedule, repairing any deficiencies that might result from that lack of quality, doesn't that add to costs and to scheduling?
Council Wright, it's Jason Malice. I'm the branch manager with infrastructure delivery. My area is responsible for delivering the transportation infrastructure program along with some of my colleagues within the IAS department. And I would say that a lot of those deficiencies that are referred to in the report are actually under contract warranty, and we have the ability to repair them through that warranty at no cost to the city. It's baked into the contracts that we sign and execute with our vendors responsible for carrying out the work for the citizens of Edmonton. So those deficiencies are tracked, monitored, and then we have a 2-year warranty on our transportation projects. And the expectation is that those deficiencies are repaired before the final issuance and release of the contract requirements with those vendors.
So that might then help to mitigate any cost overruns or associated costs. But I guess my concern is with the delay in, and I know this audit didn't touch on the LRT, but you know, is that part of, without having that quality tracking along the way, can't that delay projects really from true completion?
No, I think there's 2 milestones or key milestones within our contracts. One is our contract completion, essentially, and that's when the work is complete and it goes into service. At that point, our warranty period starts for the work, and that's when the deficiencies are monitored, tracked, and then repaired within that 2-year period, all while the asset is in service, so the road would be open. So we make sure that those are repaired, again, at no cost. We do track those, and I just want to be very clear on that point. So I think the auditor's report makes note that we don't publicly report on them, but it is work that happens. So I just want to clarify that point. So we do have a lot of quality metrics and programs internally to the city that we do undertake as part of our work, as part of our project management processes, to ensure that contractors are held to the standards identified within the specifications of our work. It's just now looking at trying to extend that to the next step, and as the auditors made a recommendation around, and that's to report it publicly as part of our enterprise performance management program.
Okay, and that is a recommendation that you're planning on putting into place so that Edmontonians do have a better idea of the reason for delays and that. All right. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Ruther, oh, sorry. Okay, I have a couple of questions on the understand the budget aspect and scheduling aspect, but I want to ask some questions on the quality of project. One is what kind of lens do we apply in relations to whether these projects, whether roads or bridges or active modes of transportation, how do you ensure in the light of changing climate, they actually withstand the impact of climate change, right? Do we apply that kind of lens to the quality of the infrastructure that we build?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, for the question. As part of the planning and design process, our projects do go through, we have certain design standards and specifications that we do evolve and iterate on an annual basis based on lessons learned and experiences through kind of different climate events. So we have the ability to draw certain service levels and standards to our projects to ensure that the robustness of their work does carry out over the life cycle of the intended asset. So I'll maybe defer to my colleague Pascal, who's the branch manager at IPD, Infrastructure Planning and Design, to maybe augment that answer.
Sure, thank you, Jason. Mayor, I would add that not only, as Jason mentioned, like we do evolve our design standards, we are constantly working with industry to look at what are innovative, creative ways to look at our infrastructure and build in those new lenses that we need to put. And so there are different ways we look at that. There's how we do our designs. And so integrating active mode transportation, thinking about our roadway in a different light so that it supports the city plan and implementation of our sustainability, like mobility plans. And then we do have efforts that are being put in to look at the life cycle, through the life cycle of our assets, how our different types of materials, choices that we've made do evolve. It's important to note that it could take 20 years to really understand the durability of certain tests that we do. And so those are things that are really long-term, but also always evolving in our review of how we build our roads.
Yeah, okay. And that's questions to our city auditor as well. But I'll ask my other question coupled with this question, which is that we need to make sure that we are kind of interweaving accessibility into everything that we do. And when we build infrastructure, are we looking at that aspect? So both climate change and accessibility aspect of when you talk about quality infrastructure, are you looking at those kind of things as well into the assessment?
Thank you for the question. And I think Pascal and Jason touched a bit on this. We did not, in the scope of this audit, look at accessibility. We focus on budget, schedule, and quality.
Yeah.
And I think Pascal had spoke to the fact that during the design of a particular infrastructure project, those should be considered in the early phases of planning.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe we'll follow up on that in offline discussion, because I just trying to understand whether they fit. I know they may not directly fit into quality. Maybe accessibility may not fit into quality, but I think climate change may fit into quality, because you want to build durable quality infrastructure that can withstand the changes, right? So, but accessibility, maybe I'll follow up off. Andre? Yeah.
Well, I would say I think they absolutely both fit in terms of quality, in terms of what we're trying to build and design. So, yeah, going forward, I think that's very important.
Okay.
And perhaps we need to evaluate that more and show that more. But those are both among many others, aspects of quality, I would say, in our design and projects. And just reinforcing that I don't think that work will ever go away in terms of constantly challenging ourselves to accessibility issues, to climate change strengths, and to the way we build projects as well.
Yes.
Because there are different ways of building projects that will help reduce impacts on climate as well. So.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you for that. All right. I see no more questions. Councillor Knack?
No, with no more questions, I'm happy to move receipt of information of 6.1 and 6.2, and then I'll close at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. 6.1, 6.2 moved. They're on the deck now, so I'll go to Councillor Knack. Go ahead, Councillor Knack. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What's going to be disappointing today is that this audit will get zero attention whatsoever. And that's disappointing because I want to take you back to 2015. In 2015, we had a probably the most challenging audit this city has ever received, related to 3 major transportation projects that were not as successful as we would have liked them to have been. And through that audit, there was a massive overhaul of how we did things within the city of Edmonton in terms of project management specifically. And why it's disappointing it's going to get no attention is because this is one of the best news stories I could ever imagine, which is that the work that everyone has done in the Integrated Infrastructure Services team, including Jason, Pascal, many, many, many others, Adam and team, has paid off. And if you think back to that point, that was a very, very low point for the city. People would regularly question, and unfortunately still do question at times, if the city is able to manage projects well. But this audit shows you that everything that had been identified as issues 7 years ago has been addressed and has actually had a really positive impact on how we're doing things as a city now. And we see that through the regular reporting of that information. We see that as being one of the only cities in North America that actually posts that publicly so that everyone can see how well we're doing around project management. So even though there is still that perception, this audit proves that that perception is wrong, clearly. And we need to just take a moment and thank every one of the team members who helped to do this work, because it is such a huge, huge win for the city to see the results that we're seeing each and every quarter, particularly under the new PDDM model, which is having just even better results than we were already having. It's not that we were terrible 7 years ago, but those 3 projects were so publicly well known that it caused this to be where we're at today. And so there have been enough people around for the last decade and more that deserve credit for everything that they've been working on. And so if there is media watching or listening, like if I could ever beg you to do a story on something, this would be it, because to show the difference that has happened over 7 years is really encouraging for the city and should help Edmontonians realize that we have a team, a city staff, that fully understood what needed to be done and has implemented it and has had those positive results. So I wanted to select it to give the greatest thanks possible to everyone who's been involved in this since the creation of IIS as a department, to the implementation of the PDDM model, to the follow through on these, and how we regularly report this going forward. So if for some reason there's no coverage, and there probably won't be because it's one of the best news stories possible and those are boring, I'll at least write a blog post that nobody will read, and we'll just celebrate amongst ourselves that that this is a huge accomplishment that deserves a lot of credit and recognition. So forgive me for being able to reminisce about some of the bad times and celebrate the good times, but I thought we needed to do so. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to support this information, and hope everyone recognizes just how much great work has been happening over the years and how that's going to help us well into the future.
Yeah. No, thank you, Councillor Knack. I think, media may not follow this. There may not be any stories on this, but I think it's very important for our city officials and administration to hear that as a council, we acknowledge all the hard work that they put into improving the process, and this is one of those good examples. And I think we need to celebrate their work, and we need to show our appreciation for their work. So on behalf of the committee, I also want to convey that to our administration through you, Andre, to everyone else that is working within the city, and particularly on this project. So we appreciate all the work and all the good work that is happening. Good. All right. So any more questions or speaking, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. So we've done 6.1, 6.2. Now we are going to go to 6.3 and 6.4.
So if I can refer to page 4 of the presentation deck, or slide 4. So to get it started, I think a definition of the staff augmentation contract may be useful. And what this contract is it's a procurement with one specific vendor through a competitive process to provide on-demand resources, in this case, IT resources. So as you can see from the chart on the slide, the city has engaged 89 IT contractors through this one specific contract and has spent $23 million between the period of 2018 and 2020. The model of an augmented contract is designed to reduce the number of times you go out and do competitive bids. So if you think about 89 times and doing 89 procurement exercises, that's probably not the most efficient model. And this model is also meant to provide resourcing flexibility as areas need IT resources. So when the audit looked at 2 things: whether the procurement of the augmentation contract complied with policies and procedures, and the second part of the audit is really once we obtain the resources, the IT resources through the contract, were they managed according to the terms and conditions of the contract? Next slide, please. And you'll note that the first bullet highlights our two key findings, which is generally that the augmentation contract was procured in compliance with directives. And the second one is that the resources were generally managed according to the contractual terms. We did highlight two areas for improvement. The first one is really around having supporting documentation to support the rationale as to why you would select a particular IT resource. We also noted that the rates that were paid for several contractors were above the stated rate within the contract. Now, the stated rate in the contract is really fixed to a particular job and also fixed to a particular experience. The second finding we had was around the scope of our audit expanded beyond the augmentation contract. We decided that we're also going to look at those IT resources obtained directly outside of the augmentation contract. And we found that 10 out of 12 IT resources procured outside of the augmentation contract were through a non-competitive approach when it should have been done through an invitational procurement approach. So we made two recommendations that you see on the slide and within the report. I'd like to thank Corporate Procurement and Supply Services for their participation and cooperation during the audit. And a quick thanks to the audit team, which is Ed and Leslie. And I will leave it there at the end of this presentation.
Thank you so much. Is the administration response here too as well? We ask that through questions?
Yeah, I think through questions. We don't have a presentation.
Okay, got it.
We agree with recommendations.
Okay, got it. All right, so council members, Councillor Jens, no, Councillor Wright.
Hi, thank you. So just my understanding of this is that we hire a contractor to hire more contractors?
We engage with one specific vendor who has IT resources under their umbrella, if you will, of which we procure those IT resources through the one contract.
So is that vendor is a contractor that we pay for the services of getting those other IT resources for us?
Yes, we would be dealing specifically with the one vendor that we procured through.
Okay, and this is an ongoing process, right? It's not just just didn't happen for 1 year.
I don't have the specifics, but I'll look towards my team to find out whether this is an annual contract that gets renewed. I don't have those details in front of me.
Oh, I guess maybe more my question is this an ongoing requirement that we need specialized IT people? I'm just wondering why we don't staff it within our own departments.
Councillor Jans, it's Darrell Croft from the Open City and Technology Branch.
Sorry, that's Councillor Wright answering the question. Councillor Wright asked the question.
Oh, apologies. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
Councillor Wright, my utmost apologies. Typically, we've used contractors where they have specialized skills that we do not have a sustained need for. So as an example, in 2018, and some of the members of council may recall, the city was in the process of moving our data centers. This is a very rare occurrence, something we do not do regularly. So it was more cost feasible for us to obtain those contractors or consultants on a limited basis for the duration of the project and then allow them to go.
Okay, but and some of this does relate to the Enterprise Commons project, right? And how long has that been going on?
Councillor Wright, I do believe, and I would ask my colleagues in audit to confirm, but Enterprise Commons was not considered within the scope of this audit engagement, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, okay, my other questions, you indicated in the report that you couldn't comment to the dollar amount of the direct contracts. but do we know the number of contracts that were not filled through the competitive process?
I don't have that information available to me at this moment, but I can get back to you, Councillor Wright.
Okay. And is there any way of getting the dollar amount as well?
I see that Daryl has nodded his head in affirmatively, so we'll work with him to provide committee with the information.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my other question is in relation to the inconsistency with the pay schedule. I'm assuming that all the contracts were paid above the pay schedule. Were there any that were paid under?
Councillor Wright, I don't have that information in front of me. I believe your assumption is correct, but I'd like to take that away and confirm absolutely and get back to you.
Okay, so then I'm wondering if they are paid more, is there any savings by not having them on as, you know, permanent staff to make like permanent IT professionals to sort of be pulled into different projects? By paying them more, does that help us save in benefits that they would otherwise receive as a permanent employee?
Councillor Wright, I believe that to be true. I don't know if we are joined by anybody from the Employee Services branch that could speak to the approximate overhead that benefits adds, but I can say that these contractors, these consultants are not paid benefit. They're paid an hourly rate, and it is exclusive of and does not include any cost for benefits.
Yeah, if we could get maybe, or if I could get maybe a sort of a cost benefit analysis between the two, just to ensure that, you know, we are saving taxpayers the dollars by hiring contractors rather than retaining permanent employees.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll yield my 10 seconds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Rutherford?
Thank you. I mean, I understand the purpose of this kind of contract, and I understand the flexibility needed sometimes in IS with those specialized skills. So I don't disagree with the principle. I guess my question is based on the findings, though. One thing I did find really interesting was around the lack of documentation for the justification. And I know that in the administration report, it said that all recommendations will be implemented by March 31st. So I didn't know if, you know, there wasn't really details about what will be implemented. So Mr. Corbell, could you speak to what actions will be taken before or on March 31st of this year?
Yeah, I might defer to Mr. Croft because specifically on these ones, I can tell you that I myself quite often ask questions when I have these contracts in front of me, especially the sole source ones, in terms of why and what the justification is. And sometimes you get them when you know you really don't have a choice, because, you know, there were a couple of snow and ice ones, for example, that came forward in December where I really needed to get that work done. And so, you know, we assessed the risk, but I, you know, wasn't necessarily pleased with having to do that. So I generally am challenging a lot of these. I think the documentation could improve, but I'll just see if Mr. Croft wants to specifically address the IT ones.
Yeah, and I would say, like, just based on the recommendations, what are the specific actions that are being taken to address? Because I understand that you've accepted the recommendations, so I'm just trying to get a sense of what are those specific actions that are being taken.
Sorry, and I guess I would say the specific action is to follow the policy and procedure, because the form itself in Ariba is very clear what you have to, how you have to justify a sole source. And I also should say that 99% of the time, the justification is super clear, super well documented in the system, and I look at that through Ariba. So I would say generally, as long as we follow the policy we have in place for justifications of sole source, and I would say the results of this audit show that that was not always the case. The policy is clear and the documentation is there and can be filled out, and I think it's about the quality of the words in that documentation, so we'll continue to work on that. Do you want to add anything, Mr. Croft, in terms of details?
Thank you. I think you've covered the key tenets here. We do have policy and strong guidance. It was not adhered to as closely as it could be. You've touched on it. So we will make better and consistent use of Ariba as our buying platform to make sure the information is captured in there. And I will ask Mr. Braga from Corporate Procurement and Supply Services to just augment on the specific actions that are being taken now through to that March timeframe, which is very short.
Yeah, that's exactly why I thought there'd be some specifics here.
Absolutely. And good morning, everybody. Thiago Braga from CPSS. So we're working in two different fronts. The process strengthening through our procedures. This is not something that started because of the audit. We were already working on it. That's why we made some adjustments to make sure that we're challenging better, but also guiding the internal business areas better. But this is one piece of the improvement. The other piece is with the vendor itself. In the past, we had a different vendor, which through a competitive process was switched up. This new vendor, we worked with them just so specifically when any business area needs a resource, they go through a requisition in the system, and that system now has additional controls to say, I need your justification in a better way. You are off the rate cards that we have, and there is that control from their system as well. So there is both the internal educational piece through our processes and procedures with challenging mechanisms, but also the controls from the systems used by the vendor that we're integrating.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just cognizant of my time. Sorry, Mr. Braga. So, Mr. Quach, I guess, from an auditor perspective, if the policy was in place, but there was still some gaps in practice, what is your assessment of why that is? Like, where is the oversight being lost here?
I think it's really trying to find out what the right level of supporting documentation is needed to make certain decisions or support certain decisions. So I think, Mr. Croft and team are working through how much information should be documented so that when somebody reviews a request that they have enough information to say yes or no to a particular decision.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Jans?
Thank you. When we talk about IT contracted services, are we talking hardware, software, both?
Councillor Jans, these are services related to support of both of those elements. So some of these contractors were for software or application specific endeavors, others were related to specific hardware technology. So it's a combination of the two.
And am I to understand that some of this is related to we are procuring a product that does not have a ample supply of, like I'm thinking, right to repair is the expression that comes to mind. Like are we buying a product that you can only receive support through that particular proprietary company?
Well, that does occur. I do not believe that was covered within the scope of this audit. So,
like, as I was reading it, I was reflecting on how much of this is actually a procurement problem that we have purchased, say, a software or something that is actually very difficult to maintain, scale, upgrade, change, adapt.
Councillor Jans, I'm not able to sort of speak to a percentage or how much of this constitutes situations like that. I will say that as an organization of this size and scope, much of our technology is complex. We do have, more than 250 staff that support it, but we do encounter situations that are rare or take additional or not held expertise, and that's why we typically look to employ or engage contractors.
Have we ever new angle? Have we ever thought of coming at this from we have AHS, we have the school boards, we have the City of Edmonton, we have the Government of Alberta, we have so many different organizations, private and public, using complex IT, software, etc. Is there value for us in terms of hiring on expertise that we could subcontract to partners, or does, say, AHS or another partner have an internal team that we could benefit from in partnership here? Like, I'm thinking about it from we're trying to cut tape for the Minister of Municipal Affairs. If there was a way to look at this from across Alberta, we are pooling resources to do our best. What potentially could this look like?
Councillor Jens, what I would say to that is we can report back on it. We think the consideration that would have to be taken, however, would be to employ those resources by any organization, ourselves included. We run the risk of having lulls. So typically we like our resources to have, and be actively working and engaged all the time. But for some of those rare technologies, if we're not making use of that full-time equivalent that was working for the city, none of those other organizations have a need, because many of these skills are not needed regularly. We do then run the potential risk that we would have a consultant or contractor sitting idle. Not a consultant or contractor, pardon me, but a full-time equivalent sitting idle with very little to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jens. I see no more questions on this. Would someone move, or Councillor Knack, you exempted this, would you like to move the reports?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Any questions before we vote or speak? Seeing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. So 6.3, 6.4, done. Now we are on to 6.7, 2021 municipal election.
So if I may start, Mayor?
Good,
with
yeah,
the
absolutely.
presentation.
Yeah.
We'll go to slide number 8, please, Clerk. So on the slide, I've identified the objective of the engagement. Just as background, the Office of the City Auditor has been providing advisory and audit services related to every election since 1989. We're there to look at whether the election complied with legislation, bylaw, and procedures. So overall, our finding, before and after voting, we confirmed the accuracy of the voting tabulation machines. During voting, the entire office was spread out right across the city, and we were assessing quite a few voting stations for compliance with procedures and policies. As you know, during the election, there were a couple of observations that came with respect to voting styles. At an advanced voting station, and also at several Métis ward voting stations. Our office concluded that Edmonton Elections remedied this situation as soon as possible. So, for example, at Métis ward, Elections Edmonton determined that the issue, mislabeled boxes, was present in 7 voting stations, all Métis ward. Elections Edmonton paused voting at those voting stations and quickly sent out the correct ballots to the station. So, it's a massive operation, and I really want to thank Edmonton Elections team and Aileen for her leadership, because to pull off a vote is not an easy task when you're bringing, I think, roughly 3,000 temporary workers. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to the Office of the City Auditor, as we were spread out, and I saw Andre that evening at around 9 or 10 in the evening as well. So a lot of hard work by the team and Aileen's team as well. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll go to council members committee members for questions. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for this report. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the advanced vote piece, because I do know that I think the audit talks about how there was a bit of confusion on that. So I just want to double check. You've sort of stated in your presentation it didn't seem like, or in the audit, that there wasn't a big issue. I'm just wondering if we have any indication of how many ballots were impacted by that particular issue, where I think, so my understanding, and I want to make sure I'm talking about the same one, is where I think some folks went to go vote in advance, and the school board trustee candidates were not the same as what they were originally expecting to vote for. And so I'm wondering just how many of those ballots were impacted.
I'm going to ask Jason to provide that information, which I don't think he'll have anyways, because of the the privacy of votes and what's on those vote results. And I think he's going to conclude that. So Jason, if you can hop in for 2 seconds and share your insights.
You bet. Due to the way that voting station procedures are designed, we wouldn't be able to actually fully quantify the specific number. I know that administration was keeping tabs on how many points of contact they had, so I think maybe the question is better answered by someone from that side.
Sure, and appreciate we might not know a number. I guess I'm just wondering, did we hear from 20 people? Did we hear from 500 people? Because I mean, social media is a hard indicator to rely on. It's all anecdotal, so I'm just wondering if we have any hard numbers on how many people actually took the time to reach out afterwards, expressing a concern about that.
I'm happy to jump in, and just for those who I haven't met before, my name's Aileen Giesbrecht. I'm the city clerk, and I'm the returning officer for the 2021 election. Regarding the advance voting issues, we had about 60 people contact our office. We did track. Some people contacted their school board trustee, who then reached out to us. Some people contacted us by phone. Some people contacted us by email, and sometimes people contacted by all three methods. And so I'd say, off my recollection, it was about 60 people for the advance vote issue.
Okay, that's helpful. So we have a pretty good feeling that's because somebody who might have contacted the trustee they were interested in supporting, they reached out to you. So we've probably captured a lot of those issues in that 60. So we're, again, tough to judge with absolute certainty, but it's more contained to maybe less than 100 is what we're thinking.
Yes, and based on the ballot accounting that was done, we're absolutely confident that the results of the 2021 election are sound and followed the provincial legislation requirements.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, as I know there were questions about that, and I appreciate the audit showed that I think overall it was done correctly. Just wanted to get a sense of that. So those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'll be pretty brief. Just wanted to ask a question about, I guess, just some of the wait times at certain stations. I know it wasn't mentioned, but that was one thing that I heard quite a bit about, just given sort of the COVID protocol and the requirements of having folks spread out. Yeah, just looking for a bit of additional info on that, and maybe again, recognizing COVID context complicated the entire process, and amazing kudos for pulling this off within that. But thoughts on those additional wait times?
I'm happy to defer to the auditor unless they would like me to jump in.
I wouldn't be able to comment very well on the wait times.
Sure.
From an
So I
audit
just
perspective.
first of all, I'd really like to thank the over 3,000 employees that joined us on a temporary basis to make Election Day and advance voting a huge success, and to the 50 people who actually were part of our core team. I've never had an opportunity to publicly thank them, so sorry for taking some of your time. There was a mixture of voting stations across the city. There was 212 voting opportunities on Election Day, one here at City Hall that was set up primarily to accommodate potential accessibility challenges. And there were some voting stations that were, I'm going to call them the super voting stations, and they definitely did see what was deemed, I think, a fantastic voter turnout. Definitely complexities. I would say a number of them are revolved around COVID for sure. Also, a number of legislative changes also created some confusion at the voting stations. We did have experiences of voters, and there was nothing we could do about it, but what did show up, and they were surprised to see Senate nominations as well as 2 referendum questions. A lot of voters, and we didn't want to rush people, but people wanted to take their time when they were behind the voting booth so that they could perhaps do some research or get some guidance from our team as to how they should vote. Again, things that we're not able to permit. We're definitely going to be looking at the ward boundary review and the changes there, that how that shifted the shifted the eligible voting numbers. And we, of course, for 2025, I think we need to look at 2 things. We need to look at the number of advanced voting stations that we're providing, as well as the number of days, because 10 days was a lot, and it definitely impacted the team, as well as the appropriateness of the size of voting station and the impact that had not only on our partners but also the school boards, because we did take over a lot of schools. And again, just a thank you to the school boards for making that a PD day. So again, this selection was done not just because of all of the help from the City of Edmonton, but also our partners.
Great. Thank you so much for that really comprehensive answer. And I'm happy you took a bit of time to thank everyone, because absolutely it's a massive undertaking, and yeah, huge amount of work. So thanks to everybody who made that happen. And yeah, that makes complete sense. It's almost a good problem to have. I mean, it's not a good problem that people were waiting, but it's fantastic to see that high of turnout at certain stations. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Salvadori. I just want to build on that. Absolutely deepest appreciation to everyone who worked on the past election, conducting an election in the middle of COVID, a crisis. Obviously required a lot of logistics, and so really kudos to 3,000 and plus people who worked on this, and also was further complicated by number of ballots. It was just unbelievable how many ballots people had to mark on, right? So on behalf of all of us, Alien, to you and your staff, deepest appreciation and kudos for that work. I do have a couple of questions, and main one is on the, and one already asked by Councillor Salvador, so I want to ask that on the long wait times. But on accessibility, when we select polling stations for advanced polling or for election day polling, recognizing that we run the risk of getting into cold weather and snow on the election day, and we have seen that in the past. So how do we factor all those things into selecting those locations, whether it's people can wait inside as they line up, and people with disabilities, particularly using mobility aids?
Yep.
Like, how do we make sure that that they're able to fully participate?
So, fantastic question, and thank you for the opportunity to answer it. We were really fortunate that we were able to work with City Council's Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I have to thank them. They were really instrumental in helping us not only plan the election, but also to give us support on how we can make sure that the election was as barrier-free as possible. So one of the recommendations that we noticed from planning from 2017 to 2021 is to make sure that people were able to vote independently, not just at advanced voting stations, but also on election day. That was something that we haven't been able to do before. So the first thing that we did is look for a voting station that was centrally located, close to transportation, and also had free parking. So City Hall doesn't have free parking, but our partners in city operations did provide accessible and free parking, not only at the library, but also here at City Hall on election day. We also make sure that we do assessments of all of our voting locations, and we actually set up a very specific email address just for accessibility questions, and that was really to target people who could have different needs, and we wanted to address those either through advanced voting opportunities, through special ballot process, or again, voting on election day. So we take this very, very seriously. And again, thank you to the Accessibility Advisory Committee of Council.
Good. Thank you for that. All right. Seeing no more questions, Councillor Knack, you selected this?
Yeah, I'm happy to move. I feel like I'm moving everything now, so.
That's okay. Or maybe I'll go to Councillor Rutherford then to move. Councillor Rutherford, can you move the motion?
What about some of our amazing other committee members that are here in person today? So I move that the March 18th, 2022 Office of the City Auditor Report OCA 01120 be received for information.
All right, so any questions? Anyone to speak? Seeing none, call the vote.
Councillor Wright? All the votes.
Display the vote, please. That is carried 7-0. 6.7. Now we are going into 6.8. Office of the City Auditor 2021 Annual Report.
Thank you, Mayor.
So over to you, City Auditor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. If we may put up, it's already up there, slide 9. So the slide highlights a couple of key points with respect to what we've accomplished in 2021 as an office. I have some speaking notes, but I think I'm going to pause and I'm going to go to the most important part, which is a huge thanks to each and every team member on page 94 of the package. Without everyone on this team, we wouldn't achieve the things that we've achieved in 2021. So I'm going to pause on that rather than continuing on with too many comments.
Thank you for that. Kate? Council members, committee members, Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a few questions about the code of conduct complaint that was in the audit. And so I guess there's a few things. First, I'm wondering if that one has been used to inform any broader work in the city. I know that one actually got reported on, and there were some concerns about what felt like it was maybe not being taken seriously, and I'm sure it has been. So I'm wondering, more broadly citywide, how has that particular complaint been used to inform some of the work we're doing across the city? And that might be to Mr. Corbold or someone from the inside, but it could be an audit question if it's helped inform the context for future audits.
I can jump in at this moment and speak to our robust processes around the hotline and how we process them. So when a hotline is received, there are a couple of channels by which we will deal with the hotline tip. If it's fraud or abuse, it will be the Office of the City Auditor who will go and conduct the investigation or the review. If it's a code of conduct, labor relation type tip, which that one was, it would be forwarded to the city manager as well as labor relations to review and investigate as necessary. So those standard operating procedures, if you will, are well defined. We follow good process, and the right people will deal with the hotline tips as needed.
Yeah, and I would just add, I don't think this one has caused us to, and I don't feel we need to change our processes as a result of this one. So we're not really changing.
We're confident in the process. This was somehow someone circumvented the process and the controls we have to do something that we wouldn't have wanted to see. Is that a fair sort of summary?
Yeah, I just don't see a need to change our resources just based on this one point. Absolutely,
sure.
Yeah.
And I know these are always tough when we have these annual reports, so we try to ask these questions without going into too much of the specifics. But so I'll try to ask it this way: is that reading that particular one, it felt like the repercussion of a non-compliance memo is maybe not reflective of the severity of the infraction. And so I would like to better understand the thinking behind something like this, recognizing I know we probably shouldn't be talking about the very specifics of this case, but I'm just wondering why a non-compliance memo is the only thing that would have happened, because I feel like if that happened in other businesses, there would be a much more severe consequence for something like that.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, Councillor Knack. I'd have to sort of get back to it unless somebody else wants to venture an answer.
Hi, Councillor Knack. This is Thiago. What I would say is that the procurement and compliance was one of the tools that were used, but because of the privacy, we're not disclosing the other measures that were taken. I just reassure you that all the actions that we had to take for this particular situation were taken. So it did not stop only at that non-compliance flag. It was properly and very seriously taken care of by administration.
Okay, just flagging in the future, I believe in these reports we have gone to express, again, not saying this is the specific person and here's how they were held accountable, but I do believe this report in the past has said corrective action has been taken. In fact, I think even at some points we have flagged if termination has occurred. So I would just flag that for maybe future reports, because the way it was written suggested we gave them a memo saying, oh, please don't do that again, which I don't, I'm not sure, not asking if this person's still with us, but I'm sure it was to that level of severity that we might have been debating that. And so to know that we've had that conversation is important, and I think we need to just share that information without impacting privacy going forward, as we've done that in those reports going forward.
We'll certainly take that away, Councillor, and understand and make sense to us. So
good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Principe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also was going to mention the violation of the code of conduct. So thank you, Councillor Knack, for bringing that forward. I was going to come right out and ask, and I'm assuming that maybe I'm not allowed to ask this question if the contract was canceled. I guess because of privacy, I cannot ask that question.
Ms. Jacobson, could I ask you to?
Absolutely, Mr. Croft. So the challenge with answering specific questions is we can't reveal information that might inadvertently identify the employees involved. So if you do want that information, we would have to take that in private.
Okay, well, it does sound like, as Councillor Knack had mentioned, it almost sounded like the person was told, oh, just don't do that again. But, with further discussion, I hear that there has been, more than just that has been taken. But I also wanted to take this time to say that the audit, I find that the recommendations are valuable and feasible. And I also wanted to commend administration for accepting 100% of the recommendations and just working together for the betterment of the city. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Councillor Wright?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to sort of follow up on that with 100% of the recommendations being accepted. Does that mean that they've been implemented or corrective action taken, or it's just been acknowledged by administration that it needs to be done?
every time we accept a recommendation, Councillor Wright, we are committed to following through with fulfilling the recommendation and the details, and then going back with the auditor and confirming that we have actually followed through with the recommendation before the audit is closed out. So there will be some recommendations that are still underway. So I won't say we've closed every recommendation from last year, but we are working to, and we will formally follow up with the auditor's office, and they will confirm or not that we've fully implemented that recommendation, and then we move forward.
I think that data is included in the next report, right? Yeah.
So that's in the dashboard then. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Rutherford?
I would like to move that we go into private subject to, I'm going to look to the city clerk for the clause related to HR and keeping that confidential, because I do think that it's important to dig a bit further, and I would like to know, especially what happened with that contract and especially what happened with that employee. And so I would like to, I do have a desire to move into private to dig into that one a little bit more.
Okay.
So we would be looking at section 24, disclosure harmful to personal privacy?
24?
Yes, section 24, disclosure harmful to personal privacy.
So
sorry, I meant 17.
Sorry, section 17.
May I suggest that we kind of park this item and deal with the dashboard, so we are through the agenda, then we can come back to this item at the end, right? Okay.
Okay, I can be agreeable to that.
Yeah, okay. So let's, do we need a motion?
So I'll withdraw my motion, but I would like to then bring forward the other motion before we make a final decision on this one.
So do we need a motion to put this item on hold, Madam Clerk?
If you'd like, you can make a motion to return to this item at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, if you could move that, Councillor Rutherford, that we return to this item at the end, or we'll go to,
I have a different question, same topic.
yeah, so we'll come back to that later on then. So if we could put it on hold.
And Councillor Knack, you're okay to?
You have
bring
this
forward?
questions
Okay,
on this
I'm going to
report,
make a
right?
motion to bring forward items 6.9 and 6.10
Okay.
and
All right.
pause this item for the moment.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor to pause this and bring forward the final item, 6.9 and 6.9. Any questions? Seeing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. All right, we'll go to 9 and 10. And this is the brief presentation, right?
Yep. There will always be a presentation, only to deflect your attention to the slides rather than looking at me. It's a bit of a trick.
No, you look pretty sharp. We don't mind looking at you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. So on the recommendations follow-up dashboard, I do want to highlight that some really great news is actually what I wrote in my speaking notes.
Yeah.
Administration is very committed to implementing the recommendations, and I would echo what Councillor Principe earlier in terms of the agreement with the recommendations, but also implementing the actions within their work plans and mostly within the timelines that were set and agreed to. As a note to committee, I believe in December you had asked for additional information on what management has done to implement the recommendations. As you can see in this report, we've identified what the actions are taken to provide more information. We also provided the implementation dates for closed recommendations to inform committee with a bit more detail. So I hope you find that information useful, and I'm very open to any other feedback that you may have to enhance our reporting to you. On the overdue and not yet due recommendations, there are 2 overdue, and as an office, we're generally in agreement with the reason as to why. Sometimes implementing certain recommendations may carry more than what maybe administration or even the office considers. Look, it's a really good report. 23 recommendations closed in 1 quarter is quite a heavy lift, so I want to give a shout out and kudos to administration for all their hard work, and I'll take any questions at this point.
Good. Thank you, and thank you for acknowledging that hard work from admin. Appreciate that. We'll go to council members, committee members to questions. I see Councillor Rutherford.
Yes, so I just had a question because it seemed like there was a contradiction between the administration report and the city auditor's report, in that the administration one said, as of January 22nd, there were no recommendations that were more than 6 months overdue. And that was as of February 22nd. And the city auditor's report, which also says as of February 22nd, says there was 2 recommendations that were over 6 months overdue. So I'm just trying to understand what the discrepancy is there.
Well, I can answer that up here. Actually, the 2 that we have overdue, they're only 3 months overdue. So I think that's the difference, is the administrations are saying there's nothing more than 6 months overdue, which is true. They're 3 and 2 months overdue.
But if you look at the auditor's report, for example, when it talks about, I'm going to go to the one on the disaster recovery. Yeah, the disaster recovery planning. It says original due date was December 31st, 2021, and the new due date is 2023. So to me, it's going to be significantly more than 6 months overdue before it's actually gets, so that we've pushed it back significantly. So I guess I'm just not seeing why we wouldn't be accounting for that in both reports. And
Sorry, that's my mistake. Our report was 1 year overdue. And theirs are 6 months overdue. I got clarification from the auditor, so that's why.
Okay. But I mean, are we talking about overdue or also like when the new due dates? Because like that's pushing it back, a year and a half on that one recommendation. So I guess I just wanted to understand those discrepancies.
So in the Office of the City Auditor report, that month's overdue is relative to the original implementation date is the way I understand it. The extension to a later date of June 30th, 2023 is something that we would have a conversation with administration about in terms of, does it make sense to extend it by 18 months or a year? And as an office, we do engage in the conversation to say, is it a feasible amount of time? Now, with respect to the one that you're speaking to around the disaster recovery program, we've been in conversation with administration, and the recommendation is one part of a larger change that is going to be happening within the OCT team and the DRP program. So what we said is, okay, you know what? No need to just piecemeal fix this recommendation and take a broader view of DRP as a whole. I can defer to Daryl, who can provide some more context around why the additional time as well.
No, I think that's fine. That helps clarify. But I think what I really appreciated about the report is the fact that it said management actions and some of the things that have been done. And I think even with overdue and new change due dates, that some detail and explanation of that would be also very helpful in the report. So that's just my one piece of feedback there. If that would be great. And thank you to, again, I would like to acknowledge what many have already said, but the willingness of administration to accept and to work on those recommendations with efficiency, and the great work of the city auditor's office on tracking and follow through on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo those comments from Councillor Rutherford. Overall, I thought the adjustments to the report were excellent, but would like that additional detail in the overdue recommendation. So just flagging that as something that could be enhanced. And sorry, just with the question about taking that disaster recovery, that one will, even with a revised due date, will ultimately show as overdue in future reports, right? I think it's one of those things that even if we're okay with the new due date, we still show it as that in future. Is that right?
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Yes, we will continue to show these overdue recommendations or any outstanding recommendations in the report until they've been fully implemented and confirmed by our office.
Yeah, and that way we can keep track. So essentially, it's not us getting to move the goalposts on it. We still count it as overdue. We'll track why, and there'll be explanations as to why. Okay, that's helpful. The only other question I had was on recommendation number for the closed recommendation, the first one, and it talked about the outcome is to implement a classification structure hierarchy for all city jobs. And I guess I wanted to double check, and maybe I'll start from the audit perspective, is that should we be closing that recommendation until since that work isn't yet done? Is that, or is it reasonable to close it even though that work hasn't yet been done? And then to the administrative side, wondering when that new system was going to be put in place, because it wasn't quite clear in the write-up.
So I'll take the first half of the question, which is our office processes in terms of dealing with outstanding recommendations. We do apply a lot of judgment in terms of assessing whether a recommendation is fully implemented or not. You know, if it's an initiative that's going to take 3 or 4 years because it's a longer term initiative to resolve the recommendation, if the office, say, in a year, observes or has enough evidence to conclude that there is quite a substantive action that's been taken, we will potentially make the decision to confirm that recommendation is closed. So specific to this recommendation, I think the big piece was with respect to the supervisory FTEs, and we were able to confirm that information and therefore close this recommendation. We decided to provide additional information to share with you that there are other steps outside of the recommendation that were also completed.
Okay, that's helpful. Helpful from how you report that. I guess just maybe to Mr. Corbould, wanting to get a little bit more detail on because I know the action says we're exploring solutions and technologies, and I'm wondering just high level what timeline we're looking for something like that, because that was a pretty important audit, and I think there's a lot of interest still in the ongoing work of that.
Yeah, I can say we're in the middle of that project now, right? So it's certainly underway and a lot of work being put towards that because I've had all the briefings and we've gone to ELT a couple of times on this. I just don't know what the projected timeline is. I'm hoping somebody from Employee Services there is to fill that information. If not, we can certainly get that to you. There is a due date on that project.
Perfect. That's all I need to know at the fact, unless there is someone with that answer right now, but happy to know that work has started and you're keeping a close eye on it too. So those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Mr. Burrows?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point of clarification, probably for City Auditor. With respect to the overdue recommendation as it relates to the DRP that has now been pushed out 18 months, that's really, I think I heard you say, because it's part of a much larger process and project that's underway, rather than kind of a lack of attention to that. That's what I heard?
Absolutely. In our conversations with Mr. Croft, and we've had quite a few around this recommendations around, what does it look like, what has been done so far, and how is that part of a bigger DRP initiative that's happening at the city. And we concluded that, June 30th, 2023 is a fair amount of time to provide to administration to implement.
Thank you.
If I could just add a couple more complications that are just really important to this discussion on DRP is one is climate change because the effects of natural disasters and how that's changing. And so what is the potential requirements for disaster recovery assistance in the future is a little difficult. And then there's also been some changes in funding formulas on DRP. So now used to be I think 100%, but now it's municipalities have to provide 10%. So we're going to pay more just based on the funding formula that has changed at the provincial and the federal levels. So those are just some added complications that we'll try to bring forward in this bigger piece of work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Councillor Wright?
Hi, thank you. Just following up on Councillor Knack's sort of line of questioning there with them showing as being complete, how do we continue to track it to show that there is progress or that the attention to these items haven't been lost?
Well, I would say when we implement the new classification system, we'll present a memo to council on that or a briefing if required.
So okay, and that's great to report back to council, but I'm just wondering how administration will continue to track it.
Councillor Wright, Darrell Croft from the Open City and Technology Branch. On the specific DR item that has been subject to the conversation here, it is in our work plan. We've got regular scheduled meetings with the auditor to continue to report on our progress. And if it is the wish of this committee, we could provide interim reporting on progress to that milestone so that this committee has assurance that it is progressing and moving forward.
Oh, okay. As long as, I mean, that's the auditor's job to, I guess, to follow up on things. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't lost somewhere. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Seeing no more questions, Mr. Burrow, would you like to move the recommendation?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
So moved that item 6.9, that March 18, 2022 Office of City Auditor Report OCA 01123 be received for information, along with 6.10 that the March 18, 2022 Office of the City Manager Report OCM 00957 be received for information.
Thank you so much. Any questions or anyone to speak? I see no one, so call the vote.
We're just missing your vote, Mr. Mayor.
I just can't, this is not showing up, some yes. For some reason, it's not.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. All right. So we're done with 9. Sorry. And 10. And we are back to 6.8, and we need to go into private. So Councillor Rutherford.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I move that we go into private on item 6.8 as per section 17, disclosure harmful to personal privacy, section 24, advice from officials, and section 27, privileged information.
Good. Thank you. Any questions? Let me see. I see none, or I can see the board. Are there any questions from committee? Please vote. That is, oh,
So that was carried.
That was
Apologies.
carried?
We had a system glitch, but it was carried.
Okay, good. That's carried. Thank you. All right, we'll give you a couple of minutes to So we have about 5 minutes to conclude this item. So do we need to, are we ready to move into public? Talk about it? Okay. Councillor, I know Councillor Principe had some questions in the public. Councillor Principe, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, how accessible is it for people to report misconduct? Is it, I know there's the hotline, but how accessible is it? Is it just by email? Is it by phone? Can they do it in person? And how accepting is that?
Yeah, Councillor, I can say pretty much any mechanism, we will somehow get it into the system for consideration. So the hotline is one that we sort of recommend people use, but we also get a lot of, concerns raised, or code of conduct can be brought to 311. If they call 311, they'll be referred to the hotline as well. But we try to, funnel people in there because that's the appropriate approach. But I've received emails, I've received phone calls, I've received anonymous phone calls, I've received hotline reports, and I would say that every one of them, the intent is to get it into the right system for consideration and review. So I believe it's quite accessible, but I'm always open to, enhancing that in any way we can if there's a specific idea on that.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you. That was it. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Councillor Rutherford?
And I'll be quick as well. I just, again, if somebody would be able to let me know what our current code of conduct says in relation to relationships regarding procurement.
So Councillor Rutherford, we don't specifically define which relationships would qualify in terms of disclosing conflict. What we opted to do is have a very broad requirement that employees have to disclose up to any perceived conflict where no conflict may exist, but there could be a reasonable perception of that. They are required to proactively disclose that. So that approach captures more than having a firm line on relationships, because it looks at that reasonable observer test to require that disclosure to be made so that we can mitigate it if need be, or at the very least we have it documented on file.
And I would just add, Councillor, that you may want to, we can share with you the code of conduct training, because there are specific examples. This is a specific example in the training. It talks about all the intricacies of relationships in terms of somebody I met or somebody I played golf with or somebody who asked me about, going to a game. And so that may help further clarify, because, as we all know, devil's in the detail, and the training is quite detailed and gives a lot of different examples of that, and that might be helpful as well.
Because I do know that, for example, for procurement, if somebody works for the city and then they leave and go work for a private consulting or contracting firm, there's like a cooling off period. Does that same cooling off period go the other way? Do you know what I'm saying? So if they come from the private sector and now are a City of Edmonton employee, do we have the same cooling off period that we do when they leave the city?
I don't think we know the answer to that question, so we'll get back to you.
Okay, yeah, if you could get back to me on the answer to that question, and I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. So that is for questions. So if I could ask Mr. This is 6.8, right? So if I could ask Mr. Edmondson to move. So there's no, is there a list for speakers? So Councillor Knack, are you on the list?
Yeah, I realized I probably should quickly ask one last question.
Go ahead.
I just knowing what we have chatted about, is it unreasonable to ask the status of that particular person at this stage? Because I think we're, based on our previous conversation, is that something we can answer here as well now, or should we wait until after the meeting?
I can certainly answer it, Councillor. The individual in this case was indeed terminated.
Okay, I think that's important just to say it in this meeting as well. So thank you. I'll move receipt of information.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Knack. All right, so just quickly to speak to this, it's refreshing to hear from administration that these issues are taken very seriously, and that whenever wrongdoing is found, there are severe consequences for that wrongdoing. And in this case, administration took the step to terminate the employee, and also, enhanced, always look for opportunity to enhance the code of conduct, and the ended training related to the code of conduct. So I think it's important that we transparently communicate how we deal with these issues. So appreciate that information. Good. All right, I will call the vote. Yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. We are. Any consular inquiries? No, we already dealt with that part. And no responses to consular inquiries, motions pending, private reports. Notice of motions and motions without customary notice. Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, just before the camera gets turned off, we do have another meeting that is
Yes.
supposed to commence right now. We will need 15 minutes for us to reboot the system and change the YouTube feed and update the delegation. So if you want to, we can't adjust orders right now, but just so if you can give us 10 minutes, because we need to switch out a lot of staff and tech.
Yeah, that's a new meeting, right? So we
It's a
have to
new
follow the
meeting. It's
process.
an audit selection committee meeting, and it has a different delegation.
Okay.